This is the Gen 6 Glock 17, and today we're going to be finding out whether or not Glock finally delivered on its promise of perfection 40 years later, or if this is just another small improvement over the previous generation, as Glock has been known to be very conservative in the past. Short answer is, this is the best Glock they've ever made. However, we're going to talk about whether or not it's worth it for you to upgrade if you already own a Gen 5 Glock. We're going to talk about how these upgrades actually translate to when you're shooting at speed. Will you even notice these improvements when you're actually pulling the trigger? Then we're going to talk about parts compatibility between Gen 5 and Gen 6. As you guys can see, a lot of that will be focused on the Radian Ramjet afterburner. This is for the Gen 5 Glock 17. Then we're going to talk about my first impressions while shooting this thing for the first 500 rounds. What did I actually think? How did it feel? And then finally, I'll wrap it up with my final conclusions of whether or not you should be thinking about upgrading to the Gen 6 Glock 17. I would like to take a moment and thank my local FFL Sportsman's Finds for setting this aside for me, because these are a little hard to get at the moment. I did pay full price for this, so I have no relationship with Glock, so you guys are going to get my unbiased opinion about this pistol. Starting with the upgrades, let's talk about the grip right here. So the first thing you guys are going to notice is the aggressive texture on the grip. The stippling is much better. It goes up much higher in the back. It has a lot less gaps in it. It wraps all the way around the front versus just having little panels on each side, and it just feels much better. Also, they included a palm swell on both sides of the pistol. It does feel very weird. It does not feel like a traditional Glock, so it took some getting used to for me, because I actually became very accustomed to and very used to and grew to like the feeling of the old Glock grip. As you guys know, I've carried a Glock 19X that is pretty highly customized every single day for the last like 2.5 years, and before that it was my Glock 17 and so on and so forth. So I've been carrying Glocks every single day for a very long time, with a sporadic Springfield Echelon or random other pistol thrown in the mix for while I'm performing a review. But I have by far the most rounds through Glocks, and so it took a little bit of getting used to with this new shape of this Glock grip. I do like it. It is growing on me. I do wish it was a little bit fatter, but I have pretty big mitts, so I think for the average person, you guys are going to really like the improvement made with these palm swells and the improved texture. Speaking of the texture, they also added these gas pedals up here in the front with the same exact texturing. Now, where my grip lies, my thumb actually rests on my support hand a little bit further back than that, so that doesn't really matter to me. I don't have this old style grip. I used to shoot like this. I don't anymore, however, but it is nice. It does give it that custom stipple job look, which looks very clean. Guys, we have to take a moment to thank the biggest sponsor of the channel, which is Brownells. If you guys would like to support the channel, please head to rangedaybro.com, check out the discounts page, subscribe to our email list, pick up some merch. All of that really helps out. Also, liking, commenting, subscribing really helps the channel, so thank you guys so much for all the love. Another major improvement that I really enjoy is the undercut here in the trigger guard. This is a huge improvement. This is something I do on all of my Glocks. Used to have to take a Dremel out or send it off to get this done, so I love that Glock is doing it from the factory. Another improvement on the grip is the beaver tail. I'm a little bit torn on this one, because while I'm shooting it, I can definitely appreciate that beaver tail saving the meat of my thumb from getting that Glock bite. However, when I'm going to draw, specifically on the outside the waistband holster, with my scoop draw, I tend to get hung up on that. I got hung up on it a few times, and it's gonna take some getting used to for that increased length of that beaver tail. Now, I'm sure you could just Dremel that down if you don't like it. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. I just wish it was halfway between the Gen 5 and what it is today on the Gen 6. I think it would still have performed the exact function that they set out to perform, which is saving your hand from that Glock bite. However, it would be less intrusive on a lot of people's draws when they're outside the waistband holster. Now, as far as inside the waistband goes, I carry appendix, so it did not get in my way. When I'm doing my snatch and pluck, I grab the gun like this, and then I slide my hand over after I clear my shirt and my pants. So it's no issue for inside the waistband, but it did kind of get in the way on my outside the waistband on my war belt. Now, another noteworthy improvement is the magazine well. It is slightly more flared than Gen 5. As you guys know, the Gen 5 did come with a flared mag well, but this is an even more large improvement to that. This is more like a EDC mag well you would see on older generation Glocks that are super low profile. That's kind of what it has built in right now, so I can definitely appreciate that. And that leads me to believe, I haven't actually tested this yet, but I do not believe the Gen 5 mag wells will work with this due to that increased size of the magazine well in the polymer grip itself. Now, one of the biggest improvements to this system, and I think this leads to the soft recoil, which we're getting ahead of ourselves here, is that this has the 45 length slide, or otherwise known as the Gen 5 Glock 47 configuration, where you have a full length slide and a 45 or 19X style grip, where you have a Glock 19 length rail up here in the front that actually stops short here, and the slide extends past that, but you have the full size grip as well. Now, what this does is it creates a shorter guide rod, which a lot of people agreed, and clearly Glock did as well, leads to a softer shooting gun. So Glock went ahead and did away with the Glock 47 model, and for the Gen 6, just turned that model into the Glock 17. So while we're on the topic, let's talk about the guide rod and recoil spring. It's a single piece recoil spring. So one more part about the frame that no one's really talked about yet, and I know this is a very minor improvement, but I can really appreciate it, is the fact that the takedown lever pokes out slightly more from each side, so it's much easier to pull that down when you're doing your breakdown routine of taking this thing apart. If your hands are slippery or something, it makes it much easier. And as you guys can see, they went to a single spring guide rod, and so far this might be a good time to mention I've had zero reliability issues with this gun. With the 115 15 grain FMJ. I was shooting through it with the Radian Ramjet or with just the factory barrel in it. So that pretty much covers all of the frame upgrades. Let's move on up to the slide. This is their new V-cut style slide, which is cool because it has enhanced serrations. They're deeper at the top and they taper down as you go down on the slide. Same in the front as it is in the back. They have a better optic mounting system. It sits much lower. I like it a lot better than the original MOS design. But the major caveat is it does not have compatibility with the Gen 5 slides, unfortunately, due to that new V-cut. Glock trying to appease tyrannical states like California, they had to redesign this so that it could not readily accept the switch. But as we all know, surprise, surprise, some autistic guy with a CAD design figured out how to switch the Glock V model within like 5 hours of it coming out. So unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of the beast. It's an unfortunate thing that companies do. They do not include compatibility with the older model, much like when Apple gets a new iPhone, they create a new plug or a new port. So you cannot run Gen 5 slides on the Gen 6 models. Now with that being said, we clearly have a Radian Ramjet and Afterburner, and Radian has not put out their Gen 6 model yet, but I'm finding that the Gen 5 model works just fine. So far we've run 500 rounds to this pistol, mostly with the Radian Ramjet and Afterburner combo in here. I think I did like 1 or 2 mags with the OEM barrel, then I swapped it out to this because I really wanted to see if you could upgrade it to this combination and see if it would run reliably, because technically the slides are not compatible with Gen 5, but it seems like the barrels actually are. Now you'll have to wait from the official word from Radian to see if that is true, but from what I can tell, there's no abnormal wear or tear on the barrel itself, on the slide, or on the frame. So as far as I can see, the Radian Ramjet and the barrels are going to be compatible with the Gen 6 models, which is pretty cool. Now moving back to the optic plate mounting system, as I mentioned, I do really like this because they replaced the MOS and it sits much lower. However, the plates that come with this gun are still plastic for whatever reason. In 2026, that is unacceptable to me. I know that Glock is known for their polymer. They were a polymer company before they were a firearm company. However, I don't like the fact that this is a $700 plus gun. After tax, I was approaching $800, and they can't even include iron sights. Again, same Glock sights that always come on the Glocks. It is what it is. That's the first thing I'm going to replace after this video is done. And it also bothers me that they don't include metal mounting plates. So I'm sure in the very near future, C&H and 1,000 other companies are going to come out with their own aluminum or steel mounting plates and mounting plate options. So that'll be very cool when those do. Now, one thing to mention right before we move on from the optic mounting system, this is kind of nothing to do with Glock, more to do with Trijicon, but I had the RCO on this guy and it did keep walking loose on me. As you guys can see at the range, I had to improvise because I didn't have the actual tool that came with this in order to retighten on the screws. That's a bit upsetting because I did use Loctite on the screws, let it sit overnight for 24 hours before I took it to the range and shot it. But these things did walk loose, so I'm not sure if I need longer mounting screws or what I need to do to get this to be secure, maybe rock set. But when I came home, I switched it over to the SRO, but I will be replacing these iron sights because they're not iron and they are also still too low to co-witness with the SRO. Now moving down from the slide back into the frame, talk about the trigger a little bit. This is a flat face trigger. In my opinion, this trigger is an improvement over the Generation 5 curved trigger. However, in practice at speed while shooting, I don't think people are going to notice as much as they think they will. I think you guys are going to feel that the flat face trigger actually is an improvement more than the actual break itself, because the break and the reset are very clean and tactile. A very short reset on the Gen 6. It's still a Glock trigger, guys. This is nothing groundbreaking, nowhere near 2011 trigger, anything like that. But it is an improvement over the Gen 6. It still has a little bit of mush at the wall, as you guys can see. So here we go. We have the take up. We hit the wall. Mush, 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 mush. Creep, creep, creep. Break. Again, it is an improvement over the Gen 5, but I think most people are going to notice the flat face nature of the trigger, which is a preference thing. I do prefer it. I do like it better because it gives me a more even surface to press against, but I think you're going to notice that more than it being a cleaner, crisper trigger. Now on my other Gen 5 Glocks, I did polish all of those triggers with some polishing compound in my Dremel, so I will likely do that with this as well. But I will say out of the box, it is a Glock trigger. It is probably 5 to 10% better than the Gen 5, but you're not going to really notice it at speed when you're shooting. So we talked about all the upgrades this thing comes with out of the box. We talked about the compatibility with the barrel, the slide, and the frame. Now let's go ahead and talk about how did it actually perform. So as I already mentioned, we have 500 rounds to this gun, so certainly a first impression, nowhere near long enough or enough rounds to say this thing is ultra reliable, but it is a Glock, so I have no doubt it will continue to be reliable. But we've had zero issues through those 500 rounds, the majority of them with the Radian Ramjet and Afterburner combo. So I am very confident moving forward that this barrel will continue to function with this setup. And as far as feel, recoil impulse, shooting at speed, it is better, but it is a barely noticeable difference over the Gen 5. So this is kind of the conclusion of the video. Should you upgrade to the Gen 6 if you already have the Gen 5? I would say no. It's not going to make you a better shooter. Vision and grip are much more important, and getting practice, getting rounds on range and training and shooting competitions are much more important than upgrading to the Gen 6. However, if you have a Gen 5 that is not MOS cut and you want to send it out to get cut, or you want to get a stipple job on it, in that case, it may be worth it to look at the Gen 6, because you're going to be spending almost half of what the gun's worth to get a slide milled and a stipple job, when you could just buy a Gen 6, get all of this out of the box, the frame improvements, the slide improvements, the mounting system improvements, and get you a slightly better shooting gun, but it's not going to be a night and day difference. So I've given you guys all the information, so you do with that what you will. Make the best decision possible for you and your family. And let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Is this just another conservative micro upgrade from Glock, or is this actually a game changer? You guys let me know what you think down in the comments below. That's going to do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for staying to the end. If you want to support the channel, head to rangedaybro.com, check out the discounts page. Remember, RDB10 is your key to savings while supporting the channel at the same time. As always, drink a lot of water. Christ is king. Stay safe, stay dangerous. Range Day Bro out.